to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. Then it's high.
Today is June 11th, 2008. My name is Sue Paul, and I'm at the Warhawk Air Museum conducting a Veterans History Project in conjunction with the Library of Congress. Today I will be interviewing Mr. Clifford Hobson. Welcome to the Warhawk Air Museum, sir.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Also in the room is the camera operator, Don Bittler, and also a gentleman who is training for our program, Mr. Jeff Neal. Sir, could you start by telling us your current address, please?
1148 Santa Maria Drive in Boise, Idaho.
And could you tell us where you were born and the year that you were born?
I was born July the 16th, 1922 in Buell, Idaho.
And could you tell us which war or wars that you served in and a division of the military?
I served in the military in World War II in Europe.
And the division of your military?
45th Infantry Division.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Cliff, you were born in Buell, Idaho in 1922. Did you grow up in Buell?
Yes, I went through high school in Buell.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes. I have
How many?
2 brothers.
Where were you in the...
I was the oldest of the 3 brothers.
And what did your father do for a living in Buell?
Well, he for a few years he did farming, and then he established a sheet metal shop in Buell and did sheet metal work.
Did your mom work, or was she a
No,
stay-at-home
she
mom?
was a stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm. And
I learned my trade there
and
as a sheet metal man.
As a sheet metal man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was life like growing up in Little Buell, Idaho, and the latter part of the Depression? Well, actually, right in the middle of the Depression, wasn't it? And
Yeah,
then,
we went through the Depression. My dad was fortunate in that he had steady employment. He didn't make a lot of money, but we were able to live comfortably as we grew up. I had the regular school experience, a lot of fun through high school and so forth.
What did you like doing in high school?
Excuse me?
What did you like doing during high school, and when you were in high school? Or
Well, I went out for sports and some music. I played a musical instrument in high school and belonged to the band and stuff.
You were, and so when World War II started, you were in your later teen years.
Actually, I had moved after high school. I stayed in Buell for a year and worked for my dad, and then I moved to Seattle and went to work for Boeing Aircraft and the Associated Shipbuilders.
What year was that?
That would have been in 1941.
Was it just before the war broke out?
Just before the war broke out.
So you were working
I
for
was in
Boeing.
Seattle when the war broke out.
Well, tell us about that day, December 7th, 1941.
Well, let's see, I can remember that I was in downtown Seattle when we heard the news that we had been attacked at Pearl Harbor. And at that time I was working for Boeing Aircraft. And my wife was, wife-to-be, was living in Portland. And shortly after that, I got a chance to go to work for Associated Shipbuilders in Seattle for the astronomical sum of $1.26 an hour. So we thought we had enough money to get married. So that's what we did, and we established our home there in Seattle.
And so you were about 19 or 20 years old at that time?
Yes, I would have been about 20 years old.
Okay. And so for the next several years, then you worked for the shipyards?
I just worked for them for about a year and a half to 2 years. And then it got to the point where I knew that my draft number was going to be called up. So we moved back to Buell for a period of, I think, 2 or 3 months, waiting for my draft papers to come through. And
did you have any children at this point?
excuse me, yes, we had one. Our oldest son was born in Seattle.
And his name is?
His name was David.
David.
And in passing, going through some papers, I found the receipt from the hospital where he was born. The doctor's charges were $50, and the hospital was $60.25. And so I kept that to show him what he's really worth.
That was a lot of money in those days,
Right,
though.
it was, yeah.
Yeah, it was, and insurance didn't help much.
Yeah, I had to put the balance on time payment.
Mm-hmm. A lot of folks did. Well, so you received your draft notice, and what did you think? You were assigned to the infantry. Was that a choice
No,
you made, or?
I had been working in the shipyards, and I was because of my experience, I had been made a lead man in the shipyards, and I had a letter from the commandant of the Naval District there in Seattle recommending that I be put into the Navy as a Navy repair person. And I carried those papers with me to the induction center.
And what happened there?
He promptly filed them in the round file and said, no, we don't need repairmen, we need infantrymen. And so I was assigned to the infantry as a replacement.
How long before you were shipped out?
Well, we went to Fort Douglas and then immediately sent down to Camp Roberts, California, for our training.
Did you leave right away? Right
Yes,
after you
we
were-
did.
So you said goodbye to
We were
your
only
wife
there
and
one or
son.
two,
Mhm.
1 or 2 days, and then on to Camp Roberts.
Okay.
One vivid memory I have of my night in Fort Douglas was waking up in the night and hearing some of the boys that had never been away from home sobbing in their bunks because of the circumstances, I guess.
Did you pretty well know you were going to go to war?
Yes, yeah, I'd anticipated what was going to happen.
So tell us about that time then, through your training, and lead us up to when you were actually.
We were shipped down to Camp Roberts, California, which is close to Paso Robles and San Miguel are the two little towns close there. And while I was there, we were there until latter part of December of 1944. And I had an understanding sergeant that covered for me and answered roll call, so I was able to go into Paso Robles. My wife came down to visit me while I was there, my wife and my young son. And they were there for a couple of weeks while I was in basic training. And then it would have been in December of 1944, we were on bivouac at Camp Roberts for our final bivouac, and they had the Battle of the Bulge over in Europe and had immediate need for troops, so they cut short our bivouac and sent us home for a brief furlough at Christmas time of 44, and then we were sent on our way overseas.
Were you given a choice of what you wanted to do in the infantry?
No.
And so where did they put you? What were you trained to do?
Well, I knew that I was going to be in the infantry. When we left Boise, they put us on C-47 transport planes and flew us to Fort Meade, Maryland. That was quite an experience because, of course, the planes weren't heated or anything, and we had to sit. We had sleeping bags, and we were able to get into our sleeping bags and stay as warm as possible. But they flew us from Boise to Fort Meade, Maryland, which was our point of debarkation, or at least where they processed us. And then we were sent from there to Boston, and Boston was where we were put on. The Queen Elizabeth had been converted into a troop ship, and we were put on Queen Elizabeth for our transport overseas.
You said earlier to me that you had a lot of marksmanship experience from using guns on the farm and that sort of thing, and that was a benefit to you then.
Well,
in terms of.
It turned out that I didn't really have to use my marksmanship abilities. As I say, I grew up around guns all the time. My dad loved to hunt, and we went deer hunting, and I was proficient with a .22 rifle. I could throw objects into the air and hit them on the fly and stuff with a .22. But when I didn't end up being a rifleman, I ended up with a different weaponry.
What did you end up with?
I ended up being a machine gunner in a heavy weapons company, water-cooled machine gun. But
You also mentioned a particular experience that you had during your training.
I had rather an interesting happening while I was in the induction center at Fort Douglas down in Salt Lake. We were going through our physical exams, and they called out GIs, probably 30 of them, and put them in a circle. Or not GIs yet, I guess, but the people that were going to be inducted, put them in a circle and told them to drop their pants, bend over, and spread their cheeks. They had a second lieutenant with a flashlight that had to go around and do the inspection. There was a captain that was taking notes standing on the outside of the circle, and at just the right moment, periodically, he would make an obscene noise, and he had the second lieutenant so jumpy that he could hardly function. It was a hilarious experience.
Nice way to kind of break the ice, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so then tell us about when you left the U.S. Did you know where you were going?
Yes, they put us on the, yes, we knew we were headed for Europe. They put us on the Queen Elizabeth, and we left Boston Harbor. And it took several days, I'm not sure how many, but 3 or 4 days for us to make the crossing, but we didn't have an escort because the Queen Elizabeth was much faster than most of the naval craft, like the destroyers or whatever. So we made the.
How many men on board?
Well, there were about between 1,200 and 2,000 troops, besides the crew on the Queen Elizabeth. It had been made usable as a troop transport by covering all of their wood grain paneling and so forth with plywood. We ended up sleeping in a downstairs swimming pool that they had converted into a bunk area. But the crossing was uneventful. And
how long did it take?
Pardon?
How long did it take?
Took about 3 or 4 days. I'm not just sure how many, but very short time really for the crossing.
And where did you land?
Pardon?
Where did you land?
We landed in Glasgow, Scotland, and then they took us from there and put us on a train, just one of England's regular trains, and took us down to Southampton in England, where we boarded some type of a landing craft, I'm not sure what they were, and took us over to Le Havre, France, which was the area where they processed us to go and join our group.
Let's have you show us on the map where the ship landed. Could you show us where you originally landed?
Yes,
from the U.S.
We came down through here and landed in Glasgow, Scotland, and they put us on a train, a regular British train, and took us down to Southampton, which is down here close to, I don't see the name here, but right here close to Plymouth. And they put us on some transport boats of some kind. I can't remember what they were, but we went across the channel over to Le Havre, France, which is right about here, and that was where we were processed again to go and join our group.
And where was your group?
Our group then that I joined, the 157th Infantry, I was in Company H, which would be the 2nd Battalion, was stationed in the Vosges Mountains in France. I'm not just sure where they're located, in here somewhere. But it was, of course, midwinter then, lots of snow and cold. But we were in the woods up in the mountains on what they call defense perimeter. As they were dug in, we were in dugouts, and rather permanent installation.
What was the infantry group doing there? What was the assignment?
They were just on defense perimeter. If you can visualize what that would be like, we were on the downslope of a wooded area, and in front of us was a sort of an open valley, maybe as much as half a mile across, an open area, and on the other side was another wooded slope where the Germans were also dug in on a rather permanent defense perimeter. So about all the action that went on there was an occasional artillery duel between our troops and theirs. And then at night, we would send patrols over into their area, and they would send patrols over into our area to try and reconnoiter, see what our facilities were and what theirs were. And
how long were you there?
we were there probably a better part of a month in the mountains there in France.
And then they sent you where?
Then we went, well, while we were there, if you can visualize, we were dug in rather permanent dugouts. They dig a deep hole and put some logs over the top and then some earth, and make a rather permanent place for you to bunk. And the gun emplacement, we had our machine gun set up so that we could cover the valley out in front of us. But we were in these deep woods, and at night, in the dead of night, about the only light that we could have was the sky was actually lighter than the surrounding area. So I had one incident that I was going to tell you about. I was standing guard on the gun one night in a situation like that where it was very just pitch black outside, but the sky, you could see a lighter sky, and it was very cold. So I was standing guard on the machine gun in my sleeping bag to keep warm, and I carried a Colt 45 pistol as a sidearm, and I had it kind of cradled in the zipper of my sleeping bag. And along about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was standing there, and I suddenly sensed a presence close to me. And I looked around, and I could see silhouetted against the sky a German soldier that was on a patrol. He didn't know I was there, and I hadn't realized he was there. So I readied myself and called out, "Halt!" And he responded by taking off on a dead run down through the trees. I tried to shoot my pistol and found out that it was jammed open. I would have been at his mercy if he had known it. So we were both pretty scared by that incident. But then from there on, after that, we left that defense perimeter, and then we were attached to General Patton's Third Army, the armored division that went up through France and Germany. And it was our job to follow his tanks as he went up through France and Germany. And he would come to a town, and rather than go into the town, he would go around it with his armor and isolate the town. And then it was up to companies like ours to go in to these towns and go house by house and clear the areas of German soldiers and so forth. And
Were there very many German soldiers in the
yeah, there
villages?
were a lot of them left in those towns, because the Germans were actively trying to stop our incursion into Germany and France, and so, like I say, it was our job to go in and clear the area. And some towns, in the little towns, there would be no incidents to speak of, but then we'd go into a town like one of the first ones was Nuremberg, Germany, and it was almost completely destroyed, but we had to go in and kind of house by house round up whatever enemy there was there and send them on back. And then I think the second town we came to was Schaffenburg, Germany. We're still following General Patton, and he went around the town and isolated it. And then they called upon the Germans in the town of Aschaffenburg to surrender, but it happened to be a town where they had trained their elite SS troops, and they would not surrender. They would not give up. So they brought in, our people brought in heavy artillery, 105 howitzers, and completely ringed the city with artillery and told them that if they didn't give up, they were going to have to level the city. They still wouldn't give up. So they started the bombardment, which lasted for a couple of days until there was literally nothing standing in the city. But when we went on in to Aschaffenburg, we still met with heavy resistance because they were so fanatical. In fact, they were so fanatical that some of the SS troops that had wanted to give up were hung by their own troops on the lampposts on the streets going into town because they had wanted to surrender instead of being killed. But one of my experiences there was on the way into Aschaffenburg. We were in an old abandoned hospital up on the second floor in a corner room, and again it was my turn to stand guard on the machine gun, and it was way long in the wee hours of the morning, maybe 2 or 3 o'clock, and a German patrol came by the hospital, and I was standing on the gun, and they fired a anti-tank grenade up through the window close to where we were, in the room where we were. But fortunately, the grenade went on through a heavily plastered ceiling and exploded above the ceiling. And it blew the ceiling down on top of us and blew me out of the room, but we didn't suffer any shrapnel wounds or anything like that. And so we recovered rather quickly and went on the next morning to help clear out the Aschaffenburg area.
Did you eventually, all of the SS troops?
Yes, they finally surrendered, the ones that were left. And then we followed Patton on into Munich, which was the last town that we had to clear out before the end of the war.
Did you meet General Patton?
Pardon?
Did you ever meet General Patton or see him?
No,
in person?
I hadn't met him. I can tell you an interesting story. My brother was also in Europe at the time, and he was in a tank company, tank division, but he got assigned to General Omar Bradley's honor guard, and so he fortunately didn't have to go into combat. But one night when General Bradley and General Patton and I think General Montgomery were in conference in this small town, he had to pull guard duty where they were having the meeting. And during the meeting, General Patton, he was on guard, my brother was on guard duty. General Patton came out and asked my brother to walk his dog. And my brother said, "I'm sorry, sir, I can't. I'm on guard duty." And General Patton said, "Well, soldier," he says, "you take my dog, walk him around the block, and I'll stand your guard for you." So General Patton relieved my brother on guard duty while he walked his dog. But later, while we were in Munich, my brother was able to get a temporary duty dispatch and came down to Munich and visited me while we were still in Europe.
Was that the only time you saw him while
Yes,
you were
that was
there?
the only time.
Must have been wonderful.
After the war was over.
Yeah.
Had
So-
one rather tragic story to tell. On the last day of the war, as it turned out, in Munich, we were again going house to house and clearing out the area. We came to this one house, and my squad leader said, "Let's take a break." So we went up to this house, and I walked up. There was a little archway before going across a porch on the house to the actual door that went into the house. And I stepped up into this archway, and I've been carrying the tripod for the machine gun, so I was kind of tired, I guess, and I put my arms up on the doorpost to kind of rest, and there was a GI trying to get into the door of the house about 10 feet in front of me. And as I was standing there, my sergeant came up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder and called me Hobby. He said, "Let me through, would you, Hobby?" And so I just dropped my arm and swung around sideways. He stepped up where I had been, and about that time, the GI hit the door with his butt of his it was a BAR. He hit the door with his BAR, and I guess the first time he hit the door, it cocked a round into the magazine, and the second time he hit it, well, it went off and it shot my sergeant through the chest and killed him. So he was killed on the last day of the war, after having been all the way from Anzio up through Sicily and Italy, and killed on the last day of the war. I've always had some guilt feelings about that, but those things happen.
They do happen
Yeah.
for a reason.
So we were situated then in Munich for several weeks, and most of it on the outside of Munich in a little town where we were able to take a break and do some hunting and some great fishing. Fishing most of the time was close to the German public in southern Bavaria, which is beautiful wooded country, and some fantastic fishing there for German brown trout.
How did the German people, after the war ended, respond to you?
For the most part, they were very courteous people, and we had one amusing incident. I was with several GIs who were out fishing in one of the streams there in Bavaria, and we had a man come riding up on a horse to inform us that he was the groundskeeper for Baron so-and-so and so-and-so, and that we weren't allowed to fish there. Well, we gave him a short lesson in history and sent him on his way and continued our fishing. But
He probably never knew a war was going on.
I don't know what he was thinking to try and tell a bunch of GIs after the war that they couldn't do something.
Were you with the Third Army when you when you liberated the concentration camps?
We were attached to the Third Army.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about that?
And our group, Company H of the 157th Infantry, we were one of the first troops into Dachau, which was a concentration camp.
Had you heard about the concentration camp?
No, not really. I hadn't heard much about it.
So it was
We'd
pretty-
heard rumors that they were doing things like that. But there was that camp, Dachau, and also another camp that we liberated. It was a women's camp, political camp, where they had women that were accused of being traitors to Germany because they refused to participate in Germany's program where they were to bear children by the elite SS troops to further their ideas of supremacy. And these girls had refused to do that, so they were sent to this political prison. So we liberated that prison as well as Dachau.
Could you tell us what it was like when you entered Dachau?
Well, of course, the first thing is that most of the inmates turned on the guards that were still there, and most of them were killed outright, very violently. A few of them survived, the German guards, but there were evidence all over of what had happened there, human bodies in freight trains, and evidence around the gas chambers where they'd been gassed and so forth.
What did you think about it? I mean, you weren't prepared for that kind of
horrifying
atrocity.
experience. Yeah. We were only there for about, I think, 2 days, and then our group was sent on into Munich, and the rest of our group stayed there and acted as guards, put the place off limits. They did call a lot of the German citizenry into the camp then to bear witness to what had actually happened. They, of course, claimed they had no knowledge of it, what was going on, but hard to tell whether they did or not.
What was the reaction of the Jewish people in the camp when they saw you come in?
Well, some of them had a violent reaction and actually killed some of their guards.
Mm-hmm.
But
They killed their German guards.
yes.
When they saw you, though, the American
Oh
soldiers
yeah, they were
coming
very. They had heard somehow that we were coming, and maybe some of the guards had told them. I don't know, but for the most part, they were overjoyed to see us.
The women's political prison, I've never heard of that. Could you tell us what that looked like and how many women were there?
It looked like a regular apartment house. It wasn't really. It didn't look like a heavily guarded prison. I don't remember whether the windows and doors were barred or not, but it was in a compound. It was they had barbed wire and heavy fencing around it and so forth.
How many women were there?
Oh, several hundred. Yeah. And,
Had they also been mistreated the way the
no, I don't think
Dachau?
so. No, I think they were just incarcerated. Mm-hmm. No, they were German people. So they.
And so from there you went further into Munich, or?
Well, we spent some time outside of Munich in this little town where we did our hunting and fishing and brought in the German brown trout, and the Hausfraus were very nice about cooking them up for us and have some of that German Pilsner beer and some German brown trout. Lived the life of Riley for a month and a half. And then we were sent over to Marseille, France. Not Marseille. What am I thinking? Versailles. Versailles, France, to a camp where they kept us until we were supposed to ship out and go to the Pacific Theater. And they had named these camps after cigarettes. They had Camp Lucky Strike. Camp Herbert Tarrington was where we were. And we were there for probably a week or 10 days.
What did you think about being sent to the Pacific?
Well, we weren't very happy about doing that. We were looking forward to some furlough time as we went to the U.S., but we pretty much resigned ourselves to the fact that we're going. But
let me ask you, when the day the war ended, tell us about that day. How did you find out that the war in Europe had ended?
Well, it was pretty easy to know, really, because I was sent on the 2-day pass with a bunch of other GIs for relax and rehabilitation to Paris on a pass. And I was in Paris the day the war ended in Japan. So you can imagine the celebration there.
Yeah, that was the
was
day
really
the war
great.
ended in Japan.
That was the end of the war in Japan.
What about in Europe when you were in Germany and you found out the war had ended? How did you find that
There-
out?
Well, I don't really remember that. I know a lot of celebration, but we had a company commander that left our group, our captain that was in charge of our company, and they brought in a raw recruit from the U.S. He'd never been over at all, and he was put in charge of our company there. And the first day after the war ended, he put us out on close order drill, which we found unbelievable. But that's the way he was. But
And so you had the furlough to go for rest and relaxation to Paris. And how did you find out that where were you when you found out the bomb had been dropped? Or did you hear about the bomb before?
I think we were in Munich when they dropped the bomb, and then.
Of course.
But the war hadn't ended then.
No.
And, took several days, and.
Of course, no one really knew what this bomb was. What did you think about when you heard it, or did you think much?
Well, I think we knew that it was, an atomic bomb, and we had the newspapers and so forth, so we were pretty familiar with what had happened.
Were you in awe of the technology? I mean,
Oh yes, yeah. I had some word. My wife's brother-in-law was one of the scientists in the what they call the Manhattan Project in Chicago, and she had written me and told me something about what was going on, and so it didn't come as a complete surprise.
That's pretty incredible. You're really to be a part of that.
Close to that situation.
That history. I mean, the atom bomb, took us through a window of time technologically that we've never gone back through.
Right.
I'd like to show some of the pictures that you brought that really do show Munich and the travels of your infantry group. And so I'll hold these up and we'll talk a little bit about them.
All right.
All right. These are pictures that you took that are original from the war years.
Yes,
And on this one you talk about how beauty is destroyed by war. Where is this taken?
It's taken in Munich. It's just a lot of the beautiful buildings as well as just ordinary buildings were completely bombed out, and it seemed like such an awful thing for everything to be so completely destroyed. That's a picture in Munich. Oh, that's just excuse me.
Go ahead.
That's just a picture of our group on the move between one of the towns in Germany. A lot of the time we were on Germany's Autobahn as we were moving troops in Germany itself.
This is a German Panzer tank.
Yes, it's just a couple of my buddies that we came across this German tank that had been disabled, and took a picture of my buddies in front of the tank. This is just a picture of another German tank. Most of their armor was scattered along the roads into Germany. The whole army had run out of gas, so a lot of their vehicles had to be abandoned, and a lot of them were, at the end of the war, were horse-drawn. This is just another German tank that had been disabled along the way. This is a picture of my squad. Unfortunately, I'm not in most of these pictures because I took the pictures.
And where were you when this picture was taken?
That one I think was taken near close to Aschaffenburg, Germany.
Okay.
This is a picture of part of our group in a city called Nuremberg. Parts of the city of Nuremberg seemed to be spared because they didn't have any heavy industry. So some of it was still pretty nice looking, but most of it was completely bombed out.
And Nuremberg is where the famous trials were held.
Yes,
in the war.
that's right.
Did you attend any of those?
No. That came quite a while afterward. This is just a typical picture of our squad during a break on the road to Aschaffenburg, Germany.
And there is a picture of you right down here in this corner. You showed
Yeah,
me.
I don't know who took that picture, but that is me down there on the corner.
Looked pretty cold.
Yeah. This is a picture of a Boise boy, Jack Lang, and another one of our squad members, Tony. I can't remember his last name, but he was the only boy that I ran into all the time I was in Europe that was from anywhere close to where we lived. But he was from Boise. This is a typical picture of what it was like in Aschaffenburg and many of the other cities in Germany that were almost completely obliterated either by bombing or by artillery.
This was a factory originally?
Yes, this happened to be a factory area that had been bombed.
Okay, we're rolling.
This is a picture of one of the on the road taken from Nuremberg to Munich.
These pictures that I'll show now are the streets of Munich after you arrived, what it looked like
Right.
From all the bombing.
Mm-hmm.
Not much left of these buildings.
No.
Must have been pretty eerie, like a giant ghost town.
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah,
walk
it was.
through. And these two pictures, Cliff, are of food lines in Munich. Did you see this right after you got there, where the food lines already
Yes,
started?
yeah, that was a problem, of course, in the all over Germany was food distribution to the people, to the citizenry.
So they were pretty well starving.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Tell us about this picture.
Well, that's just a picture of my sergeant in charge of our squad. He was our squad leader, and he's the one that had been all the way from Anzio in North Africa up through Sicily and Italy and France and Germany, and then killed by friendly fire on the last day of the war in Munich.
Was this picture taken in Munich?
No, I don't remember exactly where it was taken. Somewhere along the line in either Aschaffenburg or Nuremberg or Munich.
Cliff, I'd like for you to tell us about these pictures. I know they are about the liberation of Dachau.
Okay, this is a picture that leads down the road to a place where the only freedom was death, and men prayed to die. This is a picture of the main gate into the prison or into the concentration camp. The wording on the gate is Arbeit macht frei, which means that working makes you free. But it was actually a delusion because the people that worked there were never free. This one is a picture of some flags that I don't know where they came from, but they put up over the parts of the camp. The flags of many nations now fly over the horror camp of Dachau, and men walk hardly daring to believe that they're free men once more. This is one of boxcars that are full of human bodies.
Have to cut.
This is just a picture of another train load that they used to carry away the bodies, human bodies.
And it says off limits.
Yes, we had put off-limit signs on the on them.
Were there bodies in these when you
Yes.
found them?
These are clothes that are left over from a busy day at the gas chamber.
And you found these just hanging there?
Pardon?
You found these just hanging there when you
Yeah,
found
they
them?
were just hanging there by the gas chambers. These are some of the leftover clothes of 18,000 and some odd men who died at Dachau. Men and women and children. They were told that they were going in to shower. This was one of the many gas chambers where thousands died. Polish, French, Dutch, Yugoslav, British, American, Russian. They weren't particular who worked or much cared who died in the camp of horror. These are a few of the walking dead at Dachau. You must be dusted with louse powder before entering these lovely grounds.
Are these civilians that we're seeing?
Part of them are civilians and part of them are GIs that were there. But we did have some of the German citizenry come and visually look at what was going on there, so they couldn't deny it. We were stationed in Versailles then on our way home, and eventually we boarded a boat called the Sea Owl, which was a small boat, round bottom both ways, and we headed out for America and got into some violent storms in the Atlantic, and quite an experience coming home with that boat. It would, like I say, it was a small boat.
How many men on board?
Pardon?
How many men on board?
I think there were 300 of us.
Oh, it's very small.
Yeah, and everyone was seasick, terribly seasick. But we eventually made it back to New York. We landed at New York, steamed by the Statue of Liberty, and came into port.
How'd you feel when you steamed past her?
It was a great feeling to be home.
How long since you'd seen your wife and son?
We were given 2 weeks leave and went home. Ironically, my wife she was at home waiting for me to come home on leave. And one evening she was standing doing dishes at the kitchen sink, and a small owl came and landed in the window in front of her where she was doing dishes. And by coincidence, at that moment, I was on the Sea Owl, the boat that was transporting us from Europe home. But anyway, they put us on troop trains, and we got home, and I had a lovely break in activities. And then I was assigned to a prisoner of war camp in Roswell, New Mexico. Over in Germany, I had been elevated to the lofty title of technician, 5th grade, and they made me the clerk typist and in charge of the post office there. Anyway, when I got back home and got to the PW camp, I worked in the hospital as a clerk typist for the rest of my GI days, and eventually was sent to El Paso, Texas, Fort Bliss, for my discharge.
The POW camp, who were the prisoners at that point? German prisoners?
German prisoners, yes.
How long were they kept in the POW camp after the war ended?
Oh, I don't really know. They were still there when I left, but it was a good-sized camp. There were probably 300 of the prisoners there.
Did you talk with any of them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as much as we could, of course. And while I was there, my wife came down and spent a couple of weeks with me and brought our youngest son. And, of course, the German soldiers were very much taken with him.
This was your second son? This is a second son?
No, this is our
David.
first son.
Mm-hmm.
And he was only 2.5, 3 years old at that time. And a lot of the German soldiers, of course, had family of their own. And they were very taken with him. So,
did any of the German POWs talk about wanting to stay in the United States?
yes, and some of them did. Some of them were able to. Mm-hmm.
And so you were discharged, and what did you and your family decide to do with the rest of your life?
Well, like I say, I was stationed over in Fort Bliss, which is a separation center right across from the Mexican city of Juarez. And we were there probably for a couple of months. And we spent our time maybe going over into Juarez to watch the bullfights. I remember one amusing incident. The GIs would go to the bullfights on Sunday afternoon and cheer for the bull. And it wasn't making for very good relations with the Mexican people. So I remember a directive coming out at our company headquarters telling us that henceforth GIs would cease and desist on cheering for the bull at the bullfights because it wasn't good for our relationship with Mexico.
Okay.
These are your discharge papers dated 9 May 1946. During your service to our country, you received the American Theater Ribbon, the European African Middle Eastern Ribbon, the Good Conduct Medal, the Victory Medal, the Army Medal of Occupation from Germany, the Presidential Unit Citation, and Expert Marksman.
I had one other medal that I was quite proud of that I didn't mention there. It was the Combat Infantry Medal. Other than that, that's correct.
Where did you go after you were out of the military completely? Your wife and your son and yourself?
Well, my wife and child had stayed with her parents in Payette during the time that I was in the service.
Payette, Idaho?
Mm-hmm. And so I went back there, of course, and took a job in a sheet metal shop there in Payette and worked there for a year or so. And then we elected to move to Boise, where I worked for a sheet metal shop in Boise.
For how many years?
I worked for a company named Wasco Manufacturing here in Boise for a period of about 10 years. And then in 1960, I elected to go into business for myself. And we established a company, my brother and I established a company called Hobson Fabricating, which is still in business in Boise.
Did you have more children?
Yes, we had 2 more boys. One was born in 1947, and the other one in 1959.
And their names are?
Our oldest boy, the one who was born in Seattle, was named David, and he ended up being a school teacher here in this area. Our middle boy was Bob, and he is still working for the company that we established and later sold. And then our youngest son, Richard, is still lives in Boise.
And do you have grandchildren?
We have grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
My word. Very youthful great-grandfather.
Right.
For your family.
Mm-hmm.
Those war years in your life as a young man were surely in some way helped form you to become the man you became. Just those experiences that you saw and participated in. Could you, for your grandchildren and great-grandchildren's, from for them to know about you, what did those years help form in you to help you become the person you did become?
Well, I think for one thing, it does a lot towards clarifying what your values are and what really matters, and then it installs in you a sense of making meaningful relationships in your life with your family and with your friends. And like I say, it kind of changes your ideas about what's important and what isn't.
Well, it is such an honor to have had you come to the Warhawk Air Museum and allow us to preserve your military history. We honor you and thank you so much for being an American veteran, for serving this country, and truly giving us the world that we have today. Without men like you who are willing to sacrifice years of their young life to fight for freedom in this world, we would not have the world we have today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we honor you.
Thank you.
The nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done,